taking this look outside of Al-Aqsa Hospital at this hour, that is over in Gaza. Qatar is resuming its role as the key mediator in striking a ceasefire and hostage release deal between Israel and the Hamas terror group. Qatar abandoned that role just weeks ago, but the prime minister reportedly met with President-elect Donald Trump's incoming Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff. Witkoff traveled to Qatar and Israel to begin efforts to reach a truce, as Trump has said he wants a deal in effect by the time that he takes office January 20th. Dr. Asaf Romarowski, a friend of the show, is the executive director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, joining us now live to discuss. Thank you so much for taking the time, as always, to join us and help break this down. Of course, there are a variety of updates that we get pretty much on an hourly basis.
Yes, indeed. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, want to ask you some questions about the comments that have been made by Qatar. We know the Prime Minister did actually speak with Sky News and said essentially that we saw Trump's envoy repeat the comments that Trump had made, that he wants that hostage release deal to be in effect and the hostages to be released by the time he takes office on January 20th. So I have to ask, is that realistic? Is that an actual possibility as we are just a month and a half away?
Well, so let's contextualize it. Prior to, Witkoff going to the region, as you reported and we've spoken about, Trump made this comment about the fact that if the hostages are not released, to quote, Trump, that, all hell will break loose and basically, be warned because I'm coming into office on January 20th. I think that, obviously, everybody's watching these comments. I think that, and they're on alert. I think that there has been a sense that, from the Israelis' perspective as well, that there's been a lot of pressure on Israel to kind of fight this war since the beginning of the war with kind of one hand behind their backs. Now Trump is saying that obviously he's going to stand with them and is not going to be an obstacle in Israel's objective of winning the war. The timetable, obviously is, as always, may not be aligned. That is the U.S. timetable with the Israeli timetable. Israel is fighting a war on, the multi-front war on Iran here on 7-8 fronts. And so while there's a desire to make this happen, it may not exactly happen, between now and January 20th. I think that the unknown when it comes to Donald Trump is putting many of U.S. adversaries on notice that Donald Trump indeed is serious about making this happen and is not going to, pause and allow these kind of diplomacy talks that have, kind of push the Israelis backwards in their military objective. So I think that, yes, it's an aspirational goal. I think the fact that there's being put pressure to make this happen, and the fact that Israel is finding every day now through forensic evidence, more evidence of assassination of hostages and more information, about dead bodies and whatnot, that is definitely ratcheting up the pressure inside of Israel, as you and I have discussed, because every day that goes by, this is costing Israeli lives. And so I think that there's definitely pressure to make this happen, do this as soon as possible, and that's the hope. When it comes to the Qataris, I mean, again, I don't think Qatar should have a free reign here or get like a pass. The Emir is walking around. He was just in the UK making a visit. There's been pressure on the Qataris. Let's not forget that Qatar funded and has been complacent with 10-7. To tell you about how nervous they are, of course, once Trump was elected, they kicked out the Hamas leadership out of Doha, and of course now they're in Turkey. But we still need to they can't have it both ways. There still has to be consequences for Qatar's ongoing involvement with funding 10-7. So while they're trying to play it both ways vis-a-vis the hostages and the negotiations, there has to be serious consequences there as well.
Is it a positive sign, a good sign, that this Israeli delegation is supposedly going over to Egypt next week to talk a little bit more about the hostage release deal, that ceasefire? Would you say overall that that is a positive sign, even though we've seen those delegations head to different locations in Qatar and Egypt a lot over the past several months?
I think it is a positive. I think we also have to understand the politics behind all of this. There's no doubt that, yes, our American electoral results and the results of the election here have definitely played also into the Egyptians being once again more malleable, more friendly, and of course, let's not forget that the entire oxygen of Egypt and oxygen of Hamas, sorry, has come through the tunnels coming in from Egypt. So Egypt too, is not clean in this regard, and there has to be consequences there too. But they too are an ally of the United States. So I think that they're trying to make this happen. I think that the current administration, as it relates to Biden, Hochstein, Blinken, et al., they are all wanting to get a win, whatever it looks like, between now and the 20th, to show that over the past year, we've gotten to some kind of common, we've had a victory on our side. Again, that may not be aligned together with the Israeli timetable. It's not to say that the Israelis are not going to try to make this happen, but as far as the ongoing context, we are negotiating with Islamist terrorist organization that only wish ill on the state of Israel and the United States. And from their perspective, any prolonging of the war is a victory for them. All Hamas wants to do is come out of the tunnels a day after tomorrow and say, look, we survived this. We're still around, notwithstanding the fact that positively Israel has devastated Hamas close to 90%, but they are still being armed. And again, that's the concern as far as these artery of armaments that are coming in, whether from the Egyptian side, the Iranian side. And so the pressure is ratcheting up the focus indeed on the hostages. Just this week, we learned about, the killing of Omer Natura, whose body is, still being held as the body itself as a pawn in Gaza. But yet again, another American citizen who was a victim of this war itself, like Hirsch-Palin, again, should remind us that American blood is on Hamas's hands. So this is, again, all part of the symptoms of this larger problem and should help with the pressure. And the hope is that maybe they do get something, again, in preparation for the incoming administration, that there is some kind of win on this administration's side as it relates to some kind of smooth transition between Biden and Trump in January 20th.
What you're looking at on your screen right now is actually a live look over Khan Younis there in Gaza, and the IDF saying that their military investigation found that those 6 hostages whose bodies were recovered in Khan Younis back in August were likely killed by Hamas terrorists as Israeli soldiers approached them. Does this kind of show that there's maybe truth to the reports that Sinwar told the terrorists to execute any hostages if IDF troops got close?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that there's no doubt that the marching orders he left his brother and all, the disciples of Hamas is to make this happen. I mean, if you read Sinwar's writings today and the writings that he was writing while in jail in Israel, the hostage and hijacking tactic was directly coming out of his playbook. I mean, remember, we're talking about here a culture of death. That they spare and they could care less about Israeli lives, American lives. Any blood spilled is a win on their side. And so from the perspective of Hamas and the Islamist narrative, this is only glorifying their larger message and their larger objectives as it relates to what they define, quote, the eradication of the Zionist entity. So they have no problem with any of this. And that was indeed the concern. You and I have discussed this in the past on the show that we've seen we've seen carrots being put out by the Israelis as far as paying for information and whatnot. While these earthly carrots, as they are described by Hamas, the Hamas writings actually forbid that. They're basically saying, no, let's not work with the enemy. Let's, glorify our own agenda and continue this war by terrorizing them and doing what we were mandated to do. So there's no doubt that, the hope on the Israeli side, and still is, that the disarray that was created by the taking out of the Hamas leadership, Sinwar, Diaf, and others who were running the show, but in particular, Sinwar, who was the mastermind of 10-7, that during that disarray, people would jump on the opportunity of taking monies and get a free pass to leave Gaza. I think that that's still a potential for some, but the pressure has been coming on, as it's been, to utilize the civilian neighborhood, such as they are, in order to galvanize exactly this internal message that whatever societal aspect is in Gaza is complacent 100% with Hamas. And so that's all part of this playbook of Hamas, which they are following to a T.
What do we think about the humanitarian aid overall entering into that area? Because that's been a topic that's been discussed. We've had Israel accused of holding back that humanitarian aid from getting into Gaza, but then we have a lot of pictures, videos, things that pop up that show truck after truck entering in. So is Israel withholding aid, or are they trying to get aid in as quickly as possible?
No, they are trying to get aid as quickly as possible. And let's be clear here, more aid has gone into Gaza post 10-7 than it was pre 10-7. Let's also understand the actors here. The main complacent actor that has been responsible for the aid in Gaza is UNRWA. UNRWA is Hamas. While UNRWA has been trying to play it both ways and argue that they are a humanitarian organization and they have diplomatic immunity, they are, it has been proven time and time again that UNRWA workers who have been aid workers, teachers, doctors, civil so-called civil servants of the Gazan population, they have been complacent. They are Hamas. We have evidence they've been holding hostages, and so UNRWA denies all of that. And UNRWA is the gatekeeper of the maintenance of Arab Palestinian refugees. They have been the largest recipient of aid from the United States. It was under the Trump administration that aid to UNRWA was the monies to UNRWA were frozen under Nikki Haley, which was very positive. And to my mind, UNRWA should not be part of the day after tomorrow. We need to root UNRWA out of the entire arena altogether. And in tandem now, Israel recognized in a very monumental move that they passed a law that UNRWA is indeed Hamas. So they are indeed considered by the Israelis a terror abating group, and they should be removed from the scene. On the other hand, UNRWA officials and UN officials, Anthony Guterres and others, as you've been seeing by all these videos you've been mentioning, they've been giving press conferences in Europe and other places saying that Israel is to blame for all of this. The fact of the matter is that the aid goes in, Hamas steals the aid, and they're the ones who are, abusing their own population. And because UNRWA and Hamas are one and the same, then they're basically one hand is feeding the other. There's no surprise here by this architecture, but the blame is not on Israel. This is exactly part of the tactic that they're trying to put the blame and come out with these statements as far as starvation and famine, things that are not even remotely close to the truth, but they play into the propagandist galvanized arm of Hamas that is still operating very, very well and utilizing entities like the United Nations and like UNRWA and others to put out their messages.
All right, Dr. Asaf Romarowski, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, I'm good for now. Obviously, things are changing on an hourly basis as always, but I appreciate your time.